All right. Hi, everyone. It looks like we are live. Welcome to the Vercel community live session for this week. We're so excited to see so many of you join us already. I'm Pauline. I'm one of your moderators for today's session. Joining me today is Jacob. You've actually probably seen us around the community space answering your questions. So it's always such a great opportunity to connect with all of you in more of this dynamic format, especially just everyone in our community, our customers and our users, and really like connect with you here. It's nice. I'm seeing quite a few people already join us. If you're watching this on any other platform like X and you want to engage in our session today, be sure to join the community at community.vercel.com and join this event. Just click going to have the chat pop up. And if you are here already, drop a message in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. As I said, if you are already in the community and watching us and you can't see the chat, don't worry about it. All you need to do is sign in with your Vercel account on the top of the page, navigate back here and click going, and the chat should unlock. Awesome. Jacob, do you want to explain a little bit about the code of conduct?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So if you can come into our community and hang out in the chat and ask any questions you have here. And just want to remind everyone to keep it respectful, follow our code of conduct, which you can find in the footer of the website. And I'd just like to introduce our guest here. This will be Alex Hawley from the Partner Solutions team here, or sorry, the Partner Solutions team lead here at Vercel.
Hey, folks.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having us.
Sure, yeah.
Hey,
thanks for having me
Alex.
here.
Amazing. Well, we'll pass over to you now.
Awesome, yeah. Hey, folks. Thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to be engaging with the Vercel community team and the community overall on Sitecore GSS and Next.js optimization. As Jacob mentioned, my name is Alex. I am the Partner Solutions team lead at Vercel. I've been here for over 2.5 years, and I'm really focused on working with our partners, both our implementation partners as well as our product partners, on building really great web applications for our joint customers. One key partner of ours is Sitecore, and over the last several months, I've been working with the Sitecore team as well as some of our partners on putting together a set of best practices and a guide on how to optimize your Sitecore JSS and Next.js application. So many of you may have seen me or saw my talk over at SUGCON Europe a couple weeks back, but I'm doing the content again here with some new updated guidance, but also just trying to put as many resources as I can in the hands of our community so that we can get really fast solutions together. So a couple of housekeeping items before I dive into the technical content. So at a high level, what the agenda is I'm going to go over some just general objectives that I have today for enabling you all. And then once I kind of go through that, I'm going to go through a technical checklist. I'm going to have code pulled up at multiple times so I can show everyone how to make certain changes that are great for your web application. And then I have a wrap up at the end where I'll have a set of resources to arm you all with. And then any remaining time, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. But also, if you're online and you're able to join the conversation at community.vercel.com, that would be great. If you want to ask questions in there, I'll be keeping a chat or eye on the chat and hopefully fielding those as we go. So let's kick things off. So again, first, objectives for this session. So I'm going to keep it simple. The objectives here is that I want to troubleshoot, optimize, and then ship a really performant Sitecore JSS and Next.js application. So what this really is going to involve is we're going to identify opportunities on a web application. We're going to then make some changes based on what we identify to improve the performance. And then I have a site that's already deployed on Vercel, so we get to see the impact of those changes live. Going a little bit deeper on this, so what I've done in advance of this session is I have a a Sitecore JSS app that's the default applications using Skatepark, which many of you have probably seen before. This is the Sitecore Foundation application. So super simple application. I'm using the default setup both on Vercel and Sitecore JSS with Next.js. And we're going to be using a couple tools that you all should have access to in your browser, as well as some tools on Vercel for us to identify key information around what we can improve. And then once we've identified some opportunities to improve, we're going to optimize. So for this piece, I have a repo that's currently public. It's open source. This repository is basically a default Sitecore JSS application. I created it using the create Sitecore JSS CLI. You can see I passed in these templates. So it's using Next.js, SXA, and Next.js multi-site. I try to keep this repo as default as possible. I didn't want to do anything kind of too out of the ordinary. I wanted it to represent more or less what you're all seeing when you start a project or have an existing project. So again, this repo is available. Right now, the main branch is kind of like just the default state, but for every optimization that I make during today's session, there's a branch where that optimization is implemented. So if you want to jump ahead or reference it after the session, this template, this repository is a great place to look. The other piece to this is that I have this application already set up. It's deployed. It's pointing to an XM Cloud instance that has 2 XM Cloud sites. I'll be talking about multi-site a little bit later. So this is going to be pulling in content from 2 XM Cloud sites. And then I'm also already integrated on the Vercel project, Vercel Edge Config, because I'll show you how you can use Vercel Edge Config to speed up your application. So just know that I've already set that up. Setting up Edge config is extremely easy. It's a couple button clicks in Vercel. So it's not a high lift to add that. And then the last piece that I'll mention is you'll see me using V0 throughout. It's going to make it easy for me to make some changes kind of on the fly, as well as you'll see, I think, some practical applications of where V0 can assist you. So again, QR codes here, but this is where you can access the template and start taking a look. And then last, before I jump into the content, so I'm going to be making changes in the code. I'm going to be making changes on an actual Vercel project with a site that's live. This is just a screenshot of what the project looks like. So this application is already deployed, but just know a lot of the information I'm be talking about today is kind of in the context of showing this application on Vercel. Even if you're not hosting your application on Vercel, I think this information is still important, but there's going to be, you'll see there's many different features of Vercel that makes it great to host your Sitecore JSS application. All right, well, with that, let me go over kind of like the checklist. So this is the technical content that I'll be covering today. And really, again, the key thing about this checklist is that we're trying to optimize the front end performance of your app because we want your app to be fast, have good conversion, good SEO. But the other piece to this is that we want to make sure you're optimizing around your compute usage and cost. We don't want you spending more than you need to. We want you to take whatever you have and try to use as much of the platform as possible or of Vercel as possible. So I'm coming at it from 2 different angles. And again, this session is really the output of a separate effort to create a checklist and guide. So if you go to vercel.com/guides/how to optimize Next.js and Sitecore JSS, a lot of the same content I'm talking about here is in that guide. So it's a great reference. I go a little bit deeper in this session, but you can definitely reference that guide as kind of like just a handy place to kind of refer back to. And the topics that I'll be covering are all on the right side. I'm going to start with what I think are some of the lowest effort optimizations you can make that have the greatest impact towards your performance. And then you'll see we go a little bit more complicated from there, but still very valuable, I think, at all steps. So yeah, again, QR codes here at the very end. You'll have another opportunity to check out the guide, and I see that we're linking to it in the chat too. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about fluid compute. So this is the first item in the checklist. Again, this is kind of like the easiest thing you can do and start getting some benefit from your application. So if you're not familiar with fluid compute, fluid is a new serverless paradigm that Vercel released a couple months back. And basically, it's a serverless architecture that brings together the best of servers and serverless. And it's really the aggregation of a lot of different enhancements that Vercel has pushed to its platform over the last several months. And some of the main ones that really make this stand out are First, in-function concurrency, which is this idea that you can have one serverless function handle multiple requests to your app, so making it very, very efficient and cost-effective. And then Fluid Compute also has dynamic scaling, so it could automatically scale horizontally to meet the demands of users going to your app. So it's great for making sure that your site's always performant and always up. And then there's other features like cross-region failover, where if something were to happen, like a large region outage, Fluid will make sure that you automatically fail over to an available region. So it's great for high traffic applications or applications that are pulling content or running compute in some other destination, as that's a great way for us to be efficient by re-leveraging that idle time. So to really kind of demonstrate this, we have a great kind of visual guide, I'll just say, that was built in V0, where you can kind of see how the requests are handled differently when you're using a server versus conventional serverless versus now Fluid Compute. So I'm going to go one by one just to kind of highlight what the key differences are here. So I'm going to limit what we're seeing here to just a server. So let's say that you just have a on-prem server that you're running yourself, and you're running Sitecore JSS, and a user comes to your site to view some content. That request comes in, the server handles that request, it does some compute, it pulls some content, and then it serves a response to that user. Pretty standard, pretty typical, perfect use case for a server. The only downside, which you can see here, is if you don't have a lot of traffic, you're paying for the server to always be on. So something that you got to keep in mind, obviously, for cost. But it's great and will handle multiple requests as they come to your site. So it is very efficient when you do have many requests coming in. One downside is that if you have a ton of requests, you might start to have slowdown on that server because it's not able to handle them all. So you have to start thinking about how to horizontally or vertically scale your server. You obviously don't want anything to go down. So there is a fair amount of risk that happens if you have more requests than you anticipate coming to your app. So that's where serverless kind of came in and started to provide some meaningful benefit, where it behaves the same way for a single request. It just handles the request, it fetches some content or does some compute, and then returns a response. But then if you have a ton of users coming to your site, serverless is great because it easily horizontally scales to meet the demand. So you don't have to worry about that. And then when you don't have users coming to your site, you're not paying for the server being up. So it is cost effective still. However, one thing that you may note when a request comes in is that if there is a dependency on getting data or compute running from a different service, the serverless function is not doing anything. So you have this idle time that you're paying for. So there's still a little bit of optimization and efficiency we can add. And that's where Fluid Compute comes in. So Fluid Compute, you can think of as kind of being serverless, but we get to reuse the serverless functions that are already invoked and running. So if I have one request comes in, it behaves the exact same way. But then if I have a second request comes in, and there's some idle time, Fluid will automatically handle that second request without having to stand up another serverless function. So you're paying for less serverless functions to run. You're reusing that idle time. This also kind of mitigates against cold boots, which is also great for front-end performance. And then obviously, if you have low traffic, nothing's running, so you're not paying for just a server being always up. And then plus, this also has all the same benefits from a serverless architecture where it can automatically scale horizontally to meet the need of your users coming to your site. So it's a great place to be, very efficient. And I definitely recommend folks take a look at this if you have a site that is high traffic. So what I'm going to show next is, or one of the also key benefits of Fluid is that it's available. And you can flip it on through just a toggle on Vercel. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip over to my Vercel project that we're going to be using today and just show how easy it is to turn on Fluid. So this is my project that I have. Again, this is the skate park example. And I'm just going to go into my project settings and under functions, under functions, I'm going to flip on Fluid. I'm going to click save. It's going to prompt me like, hey, we're actually going to bump you up to the next tier of how strong these serverless functions are, because these will handle multiple requests better. So technically, yeah, it's an increase in what you would pay there. But overall, if you have a high concurrency app, you're going to have a ton more savings over time. So definitely recommend still clicking through on enable if you have a high traffic application. The next time I deploy, we will now be taking advantage of Fluid. So very, very simple to add on. The only caveat that I'll kind of mention with this is if you have a site that is like not high traffic, it might not make sense to have enabled, but I would say no matter what, turn it on. Pre-prod, we also have observability built in to capture how much savings you've had with Fluid Compute. Since I just turned it on, we can't take a look right now, but under Vercel functions, when it's enabled, you'll see I can come here and see what my savings are. So again, a great thing you can do probably today and start collecting some optimization benefits. All right. So moving on to more kind of code level changes and optimizations that you can make. I want to talk about NextLink. So if you're not familiar with NextLink, NextLink is a component that's bundled in Next.js. It's included with Sitecore JSS, and it's a way to have client-side navigation between pages on your site. And this is great because what this basically enables is that when a user goes from like the home page to a detail page, you're not re-downloading every single asset that perhaps was already downloaded when you're on the homepage. So it's great for being efficient around what data is being transferred, as well as kind of make navigation faster. There's also some more progressive features about Next.js, or NextLink, which is great, like prefetching. So if you have prefetch enabled, which is the default in Sitecore JSS with Next.js, when you view a link, when it's in the viewport for a visitor, Next.js is actually going to go ahead and just fetch the content that it needs that those pages are linking to. So when the user clicks that link, it has already all the information it needs to render that page. So it makes those navigations super, super snappy. And then it also handles the work of internal and external URL routing, so you don't have to worry about that. So if you have an app deployed, things to watch out for where you might want to tweak or think about your NextLink configuration is if you see hard navigations happening between your pages, I would suspect maybe you're not using NextLink there and you want to use it instead. And then you want to make sure you're being strategic about using prefetch. So I just mentioned that prefetch is enabled by default with Sitecore JSS, which is great for performance. But these prefetch requests, they invoke functions behind the scenes. They invoke middleware if you have middleware configured. So if you have a ton of links on a page and they're all prefetching, you're potentially hitting a lot of pages that are not even being used, or the user's not even going to see. So very, very easy to, by default, kind of have too much usage because you've opted into just prefetching for everything. So again, I'm going to show you next kind of like how to optimize this. But in general, keep an eye on your site. Make sure that all your internal links are using NextLink, and also make sure that you're aware of which links are using prefetch. So to give an example of this and where and how you can identify it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my site. So this is the same site that we just referenced, a default instance of Sitecore JSS with Next.js. I'm going to open my dev tools in Chrome, and I'm going to filter my network tab to fetch requests. And specifically, I only care about ones that are requesting JSON. So what I'm basically saying here is, hey, I want to see the prefetch requests, which are requests for JSON, for data to render those pages. And if I refresh the page here, you'll see I have quite a few rows in my network tab. And each row here that I see is basically a request to these other pages for the data it needs to render them. So I visited the home page. I haven't even done anything yet, but I'm clearly already maybe invoking functions and other infrastructure primitives to maybe go to these pages. So again, this is where you want to be strategic about your prefetch usage. And maybe this is fine. And these are all probably coming from the header nav. And maybe the header nav is very likely to get clicked. And I want to prefetch true on these on view. But maybe I don't for some. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into my code base now. I'm going to disable prefetch, and then we'll see the difference that happens when I make that change. So I'm going to flip over to my code base. This is the again, the Sitecore JSS and Next.js solution. I'm just going to do a search for link. And there's two components in Sitecore JSS that use NextLink kind of out of the box. And one is the navigation component. So I'm going to go into this NextLink, and I'm just going to set prefetch to false. And then I'm going to go to the title component and do it here as well. So super simple. I'm going to then commit these changes. And because I'm already wired up to Vercel, when I commit these changes and push them up, it's automatically going to kick off a production deployment. So in a couple seconds, I'll have this live to preview. But while it's deploying, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Alex, you just disabled prefetch. So didn't you just actually hurt performance? And it's a totally valid call out that I perhaps did that. But I wanna call out a nuance with this, and something you should definitely be aware of with Pages Router and Sitecore JSS. And that's when prefetch is false, you actually still do have some benefits of prefetching. And specifically, when prefetch is false in Pages Router, when you hover, it will prefetch. So you still get some kind of like last second prefetching benefits to help speed up that nav. So it's not a wash because I'm just setting this to prefetch false. So that's the first thing. And then also, I would say that in general, you want to, I would personally recommend that you look for opportunities to opt into true rather than to by default opt into true for everything. And a good example of why I recommend this is I'm going to pull up a site that has a good number of links, and you can see just how quickly it is for this kind of cascade into a lot of network requests that are going to drive function invocations. So for this example, I'm going to go to, this is Next.js Commerce. That was not the current version. This is the older version that was built on Pages Router. But I'm going to do the same thing here. And you can see this is like a e-commerce site. And I'm going to go into the network tab. And I already have it filtered on to JSON requests. And if I refresh here, you'll see I have quite a few prefetches happening. And then if I scroll down, every single link that I have is going to net a prefetch. So this actually isn't that bad. I've seen quite a few customers that have like 20 or so links in the footer, and then on one page view where the user views the home page, the entire page, they're having upwards of like 80 requests, which is I think what you want to avoid. I don't think it's relevant necessarily to have prefetching for every single link, just the ones that you're very, very sure they're going to click. So wanted to use this as an example. Also, if folks have a site that they are comfortable sharing in the chat right now, I'd be happy to take a live look and show you exactly how you can identify this. But if no one wants to jump in, this is a good example. So let's go now back to our Vercel application and just check on this deployment. So we have this deployment went up, so you can see I disabled prefetch. So I'm just going to go back to my site, and then we'll see the difference here. So I'm going to refresh. And because I opted those links into prefetch false, nothing is prefetching on view. But if I were to hover on the about link or the contact us page, you can see now we're grabbing that data slightly ahead of time. So again, I think this is a great way to help drive down some of your usage, as well as still collect some meaningful performance benefits on your site. All right, so flipping back to our slides here, I just walked through kind of next link. Next, I want to talk about middleware. So middleware can be a larger conversation, and I'm going to touch on quite a few topics here. So stay with me. But if you haven't used middleware, so middleware is basically compute that runs between the user and your application. So it runs really close to the user, so it's extremely fast to spin up and execute. And then it's a great place to run some logic that maybe you want to route the user somewhere else, or update headers, or otherwise look at the request to do certain operations, and then pass the user along to your site. So it's a super flexible and useful primitive in Next.js and Vercel. It's going to enable you to do like route-based access control, bot protection, A/B testing. Very, very common way it's leveraged in Next.js or Sitecore JSS with Next.js is redirect handling. But because it's so useful, it's very easy to use it too much. So when you have your site, I'd say watch out for high middleware invocation. And part of bringing down your usage is going to make sure that your middleware matcher, which is a configuration that's exported from your middleware.ts file, is to make sure it's not running for more pages than you need. You should only run middleware on the required areas of your site. And then also, you want to be careful about any long-running process or functions in middleware, or in other words, doing a fetch in middleware can be very tricky to manage. And the reason for this is you can kind of think as middleware as being like a checkpoint. And the user can't get to your site until this checkpoint is more or less done and they're routed to the application. So anything you have here is adding latency to your overall page speed. And if you have a very permissive matcher where it's running for every single page on your site, it's a really easy way to harm performance across your entire app. So middleware is great, but you need to know how to leverage it the best way. So my recommendations are, again, make sure you're only running middleware for critical paths. One thing about Sitecore JSS that kind of you have to work around is if you're using multi-site and you're using the multi-site plugin, by default, this needs to run for every single route. So if you're using multi-site, you're already using a very permissive matcher, and we should look for opportunities to mitigate that. And then if you're using fetch in middleware, which is used for a couple of different middleware plugins with Sitecore, I think there's often an opportunity to integrate a product like Edge Config to do the data lookups to that data source instead of a round trip to Sitecore CMS. So I'm going to hit on each one of these and how you can mitigate, and then hopefully this gets the wheels turning for many of you and how you can optimize for your own business case. So first, I want to talk about multi-site. So the reason I'm picking up multi-site first is if you have multi-site, you have this plugin enabled, it requires that it runs for every single page. And while that's necessary when you absolutely need multi-site, it's going to have a performance impact. And oftentimes, multi-site can actually be configured a different way without the plugin so that you can run middleware less frequently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can remove multi-site and instead use separate Vercel projects to get the same functionality, but with better performance. So I'm going to go back to my application, and we're going to go take a look at the multi-site plugins. So I'm going to go to source, lib, middleware, plugins. And by default, for the instance that I've installed, we have 3 plugins. We have multi-site, personalize, and redirects. Now, multi-site, as I'm saying, we're going to remove. And I can safely remove this because, one, I only have 2 sites. I'm not spinning up like a new site every single day. So it's pretty easy to create a new site in Vercel. I don't plan on adding another site anytime soon. So for me, I don't think I need a dynamic multi-site plugin to handle this for me. Generally, I would say in most cases, unless you have a ton of sites that you're constantly moving in and or out of your application, I think there's a legit case to just have separate projects instead and then get the benefit that I'm about to show you. So I'm just going to delete this plugin. And then also, another plugin that we have here is Personalize. So I'm not using Personalize right now. And even though I'm not using it, when the Personalize plugin is included, it actually is doing a round trip to middleware or to Sitecore for data. So I don't need it. I'm going to remove it. It's going to help me on that fetch point. And then I'm going to leave redirects in here for now. So I removed multi-site. And then the next step that I want to show is since I've removed multi-site, I don't need middleware now running for every single page. So I'm going to go to my middleware file. And in my middleware, this is the matcher that I was referring to before. So there's a config that's exported. This is the matcher. And what this matcher is saying is, hey, run middleware for the homepage and then run it for, this is a negative matcher, for every page that isn't one of these. So very permissive. And I don't need this to run for the homepage. If I'm going to handle multi-site somewhere else, I actually don't plan on ever redirecting the homepage somewhere else. So I'm just going to remove the homepage as one of the locations that middleware runs. And like right out of the gate, homepage, super popular page, my most popular page probably. So by removing this, I'm already driving invocations of middleware way down after I ship it. So I'm going to start with this. I think there's probably still an opportunity for me to fine tune the other pages, but even just removing the homepage is a big win in my opinion. So I'm going to commit these up to my repo. This is going to kick off a deployment. While that's running, I want to show just kind of like how you can identify this in Vercel or otherwise see that maybe middleware is kind of something that you need to tweak. So if I go to my dashboard and I go to logs, my logs are going to show me requests happening in my site. And what's really nice about Vercel logs is that I can filter these logs by a resource. So I'm going to filter it by middleware. So now I get to see all the requests to my site that invoked Edge middleware. So great place for me to confirm. And then I could also click on one of these requests and see pretty useful information. So for example, this was a request to my homepage. I could see it invoked middleware. And it also tells me, hey, there was 2 external API calls done for middleware, and each of them had, a certain amount of latency because I'm waiting on a response. So this is an additional overhead that was added to this page view for the homepage. So right away, and honestly, this isn't even that slow for what I usually see. But if I were to just remove these fetches, I'm getting a clear benefit to my page speed. So logs are a great place to check out to confirm this. I'll also just call out like observability in general is fantastic. There's an external APIs tab that you can go to where you can see basically all the external APIs that are being requested from your app. You can see I have the Sitecore GraphQL endpoint. I can view my functions and see middleware is the #1 consumer of that endpoint, which is a little bit odd to me because I would expect that to be like the pages that are rendering content, not necessarily middleware. So another good place to maybe check and see where your data is being consumed from. So let's go check on our application. I'm sure these changes are now live. Yep. So I've removed the multi-site plugin and I've optimized that middleware from not running. So now if I'm just gonna hit the site a couple times. I'm gonna go back to my logs, and you can see now I have a request to the homepage. There is no invocation of middleware. So I've successfully now removed middleware invocation from the homepage. The only other piece that I obviously need to do is I just remove multi-site. How do I need to add that site back? So this is very easy to do on Vercel. So I have a project for my site 01, and I need to add a new project for site 02. To do that, I'm going to go to add new project. I'm going to import the same repository. So same repo, my changes, my optimizations will still hit both applications. I'm just going to call this project the same, but session 02. I'm going to set my environment variables, and I'm just going to change the site name to 02. So with that, that's all I needed to do. This is going to take a minute or so to deploy, but then when it's done, I'm going to have my second site that was previously being handled in middleware is now just going to be a separate project on Vercel. There's no additional cost for me having a separate project on Vercel. You can have as many as you want. So really easy to just set that up and not have to worry about potential costs there. All right. So moving on, let's talk a little bit more about redirects. So redirects are something that I see on a lot of Sitecore sites. It's very necessary. You probably have a large redirects library that need to continue to be managed by your content team. And this is another plugin where it's doing a round trip to Sitecore to get it. So you're having that latency added on top of all your page views or page speed. So what I'm going to show you is how you can actually integrate Edge config to basically push the redirect data from Sitecore into Edge config, which will then be moving forward kind of the source of truth for those redirects. So what I've done ahead of time is I already have an Edge config store available. This is very easy to set up. And I'm going to add an integration to my application to do 2 things. It's going to, one, take data from Sitecore via a webhook from Sitecore that contains the redirect information. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's going to then handle in middleware those requests like it is right now. But instead of doing a request to Sitecore for the redirects, it's going to look at Edge config, which is going to be like a sub 5 millisecond lookup time. So it's going to be very, very fast. So to help me make this change, what I've done is in V0, I created a chat where I basically just had it scaffold this integration for me. So I'm not going to go line by line. It's too much to cover here. But what I have is I have a new middleware plugin specifically for Edge config that will look at the redirects in Edge config. And then I have an API route handler. So this is the API that Sitecore is going to call whenever redirects are published in Sitecore. So to add this to my site, I'm going to just grab this command from V0 and then flip over to my solution. I'm going to paste this in. This is going to copy those files directly into my site. It's going to change a couple, and it's going to confirm that I'm okay with that, which I am. I'm going to update this. Push it. So now those changes are going to be live in a minute or so. While that's running, let me show you the Sitecore configuration piece. So in Sitecore, to make this possible, I have my desktop and I manage my redirects in the same place I always have in Sitecore. I go to my site, demo site 01. I go to my settings. There's a redirects folder, and then I have a redirect map. So in here, I have a couple thousand redirects I've placed in here for demo purposes. I could have as many as you'd like. This is going to continue to be the source of truth for my redirects. Nothing changes there. And then I needed to create a webhook to basically push this data to my Next.js application. And for that, you go to System, Webhooks, Redirect Webhook. And I'm saying, hey, when you publish, and the item is a redirect map, I want you to push the information to this API endpoint, which is the new endpoint I just made my changes for. So this is everything that I need to do in Sitecore, and I'm done. So let's take a look at the deployment and make sure this is live before I make any changes. Just finished. So I'm going to go into Sitecore. I'm going to go to my redirect map. I'm going to do a publish. I'm going to give it a sec to do its thing. Right. And then I'm going to go to my edge config store, and we see right away all those redirects have been pushed into my redirect store for me to quickly look up. And then if I go to my front end, and I'm going to go to the old about page, which was that first redirect in the list. So I want old about. It's going to route me to the about page. I'm on the about page. If I check my logs now, whoops. Oh, this is the other app. Second. All right. So if I go to my logs, you can see I have old about. The little M represents that there was a middleware invocation for that, which makes sense. But very importantly, I don't have an external API call. So we've just trimmed out a ton of time that could have been spent looking for that redirect because we have that edge config lookup that's right there, right next to the middleware. So we're already in a much better spot. Now, one thing that you may have noticed if you're particularly eagle-eyed is that I pushed in a couple thousand redirects. I think I have like 2,000 in there. And if you look at the storage size limits, I'm butting up against what I can do there. So often I hear customers have, I don't know, tens of thousands of redirects that they've accumulated over 15 years of having Sitecore, and it's not gonna work if I hit a limit after just 2,000. So there's a whole other way you can do this. Same architecture. We're going to use edge config, but what I'm going to do instead of storing a flat dictionary in edge config is I'm going to use a different data structure that's going to allow me to store more redirects in edge config, but still have really great performance. That data structure is called a Bloom filter. In our guides, we actually have some guidance on how you can add a Bloom filter to edge middleware for kind of this purpose. I'm going to add that next, and we'll see just how much storage that uses instead, which is going to let us store a lot more redirects in edge config. So I'm going to go back to my site, and actually I should reference, I do have a Bloom filter v0 as well, and the solution that I have in that repo also has a branch for Bloom filter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my redirects directory. I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to call it simple Bloom filter. So this is going to be the implementation of this data structure. Again, I am not going to take credit for the implementation. I had v0 create it for me. So I am just pasting this in here for the data structure that we're going to store in edge config. And then I want to update my two existing files. So I need my edge config middleware to handle a Bloom filter instead of a dictionary. So I'm just going to replace everything that I have in here with a separate implementation. And I realize I'm kind of glossing over this implementation, but Again, I definitely recommend folks just take a look at the repo if you want to see the full implementation details. I'm doing the same thing for the API handler, which needs to create a Bloom filter in Edge config. I'm going to save this. I'm going to commit these changes. And this will push up my change and we'll have a deployment. I see a question from Luke on V1 or V2. I am using V1 right now of the Sitecore publishing service. I'll talk a little bit more about publishing in a sec. All right, so that's deploying up. And what I'll show is I'm going to go to my Edge config. And because we're going to be storing a new structure in here, I'm just going to go ahead and reset this back to empty. Let's take a look at our deployments, which is running. Yeah, so while this is running. So yeah, I'm using version 1 of Sitecore Publishing. The next step that I'll talk about is ISR, where I'll get a little bit more into the details of some publishing considerations. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Luke. All right, so again, we're waiting for this to deploy, and then I'm going to publish my redirects again in Sitecore to push this up. I should note that there is a trade-off with Bloom filters. I'll be able to store more information there, but a Bloom filter doesn't actually contain all the redirect information. It just contains whether or not the redirect is present. So if it is present and I need to do a redirect, then I do a round trip to Sitecore for the path I need to route to. So there is a penalty, if you want to call it that, of if you're hitting a route that is a redirect. But if you're hitting a page that isn't a redirect, like the home page or a page that's actually on your site, there is no round trip to Sitecore. So you still have the same performance, the fast performance that you had without it at all. So this published, if I go to my Edge config, I have my data structure stored in here. And most importantly, you see I am using a much smaller footprint of data. And through testing, I was able to fit like over 60,000 redirects in Edge config in this method. So it's definitely viable and good to use this if you want to handle redirects in this way. And then just to show that I am not lying, if I go to the site and go to old about, this will route me to the about page. So we're still in a great spot. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next step. Let's talk about ISR. So ISR, incremental standard regeneration, brings together the benefits of static site generation with server-side rendering. It lets you regenerate the HTML for your site without having to do a deployment. And there's also this concept of on-demand revalidation where you can have an API that you can hit to basically say, whenever you want, recreate the HTML for this static page. So you have super fast page speed, but you still get to update it whenever you want. So it's the best of static and dynamic. If you're thinking about whether or not you need to optimize for ISR, I would take a look at what's your frequency of stale responses on your site, which kind of can imply that you have an ISR interval that's really short, meaning that you're constantly running some serverless function that's regenerating HTML, which is not great for consumption costs. Likewise, if you have high serverless usage, you may be running this regeneration quite frequently, or in general, you have low cache hit rates. ISR is the default in Sitecore JSS with Next.js. So unless you've changed it, you're already using it, which is great. But generally, I recommend you go in here and change the revalidation period because the default is 5 seconds. And what this revalidation time means is when it's set to 5 seconds, this means that when a user goes to your site, if 5 seconds has been surpassed since the last generation, that first user will receive a stale response, meaning they'll see the stale version of that page. And then Next.js will regenerate that page, and the next user will see the updated content. So I just want to call that out again. A 5-second interval doesn't guarantee that every 5 seconds the page regenerates, regenerates. It just means that the first user, after that time has expired, will get a stale response, and then that next user sees the updated content. And I'm calling that out because I think sometimes people set this interval really, really short because they think it's going to regenerate always at 5 seconds. And that's not what it means. If you really want to have the content updated as quickly as possible, you should implement on-demand revalidation. And I already know it's coming. On-demand revalidation is very tricky to hook up with Sitecore. There's caveats. There's cases where it might not work perfect. So I'm putting this quote in here, improvement over perfection, because you could definitely add on-demand revalidation for key pages, key areas of your site to start getting some benefit. But if you need to have the perfect solution for everything to even get started, then you might not be able to do it. So I would say start small, start with a couple pages, add it, get some benefit, and then look for ways to add it for other pages that might be a little bit tougher. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add it, and then we're gonna see how this works. So I'm gonna go to my ISR section here. I have another V0 that, well, so I'll talk about the interval first. So the default is 5 seconds. This is what we want to change to be much longer so that this function runs less. And this is in the catch-all route in Sitecore. I'm going to add the integration here. So I already have an API route implemented that will take information from Sitecore on publish and then revalidate a page that it provides. So I'm just going to grab this code. I'm going to go to my application. I'm going to add this API handler that's going to do on-demand revalidation. And then the other piece is, because I'm adding on-demand revalidation, I really don't need my page to be revalidating every 5 seconds. So I'm going to set this to something better, which is every hour. So this means that if a page isn't on-demand revalidated, at most, the content will be revalidated every hour. So I'm going to push this up. Had a typo in there. All right, so that'll be live in a couple seconds. Now, the other piece of this, so my change is going to be live in a sec, but the other piece of this is, as many of you know, when you publish in Sitecore, if you're relying on a publish webhook, publish will run before the data has propagated to Experience Edge, which is a problem because if the content's not there and you regenerate the page, you have stale content. So you can't use the same webhook I just showed for Edge config. You need to use something else. So what I point people towards for this is take a look at Sitecore's Experience Edge admin API. You can configure webhooks in here that will run after the data has propagated. Now, there's no UI for this, like that you just use Sitecore's REST API to create these webhooks. What I've done, which is a great use case for V0, just to toot my own horn here, is I created a UI for this exact use case where I just gave it the spec for Sitecore's Experience Edge admin API and just said, hey, create a UI for me to create these webhooks. So I'm going to use this to actually create my webhook that we're going to call when there's a publish in Sitecore. So I'm just going to log in with my credentials here. Oops. Sorry, I should have done that beforehand. And then I'm going to create a webhook. And then the endpoint that's being stood up is demo/API/revalidate. It was created by me. All right, so now I have this webhook ready to go. It's going to tell me the next time it runs. What I'm going to do to show this is I'm going to go to my about page and I'm going to make a change. Actually, you know what? Just to sanity check. Okay, so my deployment's done, so I'm all good to go. So my API handler or my API is there, ready to be called to revalidate pages on demand. I'm going to update my about page to just have text change to refresh. All right, so I'm updating the text here. I'm going to publish. And this is where I was saying before, this is going to say publishing. Eventually, it's going to finish publishing. just because the button is not saying publishing doesn't mean the data has actually propagated. So we have to wait for that webhook to be called in order to actually see content is updated. So we'll give this a couple seconds to run, which I know time can vary sometimes with publishing in Sitecore. And then what I'm going to do is I actually have two different versions of the page. Okay, so the publish is done. We're going to keep an eye on the webhook here. This will tell me when the webhook has fired after propagation. And then what I'm going to do is I have two versions of the site. I have a version of the site that is not using on-demand ISR, but it has that 5-second interval. And then I'll show you how just because the content is published, there is a delay with when they see that content updated. And then I have the optimized version where we'll see the content immediately present. So let me check the chat here while we're waiting. Unrelated question: is it common practice to use Vercel Edge config to store authorization tokens for various third-party APIs? Good question. One that I haven't seen, to be honest, and I don't know if it's great to store authorization tokens in there. So you're actually going to probably hit write limits. So there's a limit of the number of writes that you can do to edge config. You may hit that fairly easy if you're always writing to it. So, and also I personally would not store sensitive information in edge config, given that it's just available for reading from anyone that has access to your dashboard. So I wouldn't personally put stuff there. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm starting to get a little bit nervous, but we see now that the webhook is called. It was successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to the unoptimized site. So this does not use on-demand ISR. It uses that 5-second interval. I'm going to click refresh. And again, this is going to be a stale response because I've surpassed the 5 seconds. I've hit the site. It's stale. Now, if I'm the second user going to the site and I visit the page, now it's updated. So I use this to again, drive the point that 5 seconds doesn't guarantee 5 seconds that it's running. It just guarantees that the first user after that is going to regenerate or the first request to that page after that is going to regenerate the HTML. And this is a clear distinction versus just using on-demand ISR, where the very first user is going to see the updated content, which is what you want. So that's on-demand ISR. I know there's a lot of complexity with adding this that I'm kind of glossing over depending on your business case, but I think it's a good thing to explore. One potential hurdle you'll deal with that I've seen is like if you're dealing with deletions of pages, if you try to pull the path name for an item that's gone Sitecore, you can't. So you need a different strategy for figuring that out, or a different persistence mechanism for finding the path, which I know there's different ways around, but that's just one thing I want to call out. All right, I'm being conscious of time here. This was the last big topic, so we're going to move quicker through the next couple ones. We've gone through on-demand revalidation. Next topic that I have is next image and next font. Definitely want to be using these on your site. Tweaking these can vary depending on your Sitecore JSS implementation. The gist of these components are next image and next font come with Next.js. There are ways to optimize your assets to improve your core web vitals and completely eliminate layout shift, as well as make sure you're only sending over the exact files that you need for the user to view your page. So it will bring down the amount of data that you're transferring, in other words, which is great for cost. It's also going to avoid, or it's going to prevent having to do an extra TLS handshake, like if you're using a CDN for your fonts, which would be better for your site speed. And then, like I mentioned, it should drive down, or it should eliminate or drive or improve your layout shift. Some things around this to make sure are moving into the recommendations here. So by default, next font is not used in Sitecore JSS with Next.js. So if you're using it, there's probably an opportunity for you to swap in next font instead of just a tag for Google's or whatever third-party fonts that you have. And I have in that repo, I have an example of the solution that you would do to basically swap this in. And what this does is when you move to next font, basically you can think of it as like it pulls the fonts down locally. So you don't have to rely on a third-party CDN. So again, by default, Sitecore JSS doesn't use next font, so you probably want to swap that in. And then you want to make sure you're at least running on Sitecore JSS Next.js 20.1 or above for next image, because prior to that version, it wasn't using Vercel image optimization if you are using Vercel. So if you're on that version or above, you're then using next image, you're using Vercel image optimization on top of that. We just made our pricing much cheaper for image optimization. It's a great tool to make sure that your images are optimized for the front end. So I definitely recommend that. I think the current version of JSS is like 22. It's definitely 22. I forget the rest of the version, but most likely, if you set this up recently, you're probably already using next image the right way. And just to like a quick demo to show why you want to use next font, which for me, this is like a pet peeve when I see this on sites, is here's a version of the Sitecore site that doesn't use next font. And if I refresh, you can see there's like a very, it's quick, but there is definitely a layout shift happening because it has that slight delay where it needs to get the font. So it's definitely a penalty to your core web vitals. But if you use next font and I hit this, you can see it is super, super stable UI because that font has already been accessed and it's being included. So much better for your core web vitals if you're using next font. All right, and then the last item is around the editing experience. So this was Sitecore put out documentation on this. I know there's been some thought leadership as well from Christian Hahn from the Sitecore JSS team. But Sitecore had, if you're using XM Cloud and the Pages editor, definitely check out and make sure you're using metadata-based editing, which is a different way of configuring how the editing experience works within Sitecore, where less data is going to be basically passed to the front end whenever you're editing a page. So the data will be a smaller data payload, which is good for page speed as well as data that you're consuming on Vercel. You need to be on JSS 22.1 and above. Main caveats are you have to be using Pages. Using Experience Editor or the legacy way of editing Pages is not going to work, which this may require that you upgrade JSS or otherwise do configuration changes. So Sitecore's got very clear documentation on how to actually configure for this. It's pretty straightforward, but I definitely point folks to this if you've encountered issues with data consumption due to editing in the past. So that's it for that topic. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind going through all this content, but if there's one slide you take away, I just want to hit these high level points one last time. If you take away one slide, it's you should do these things: enable fluid, keep an eye on your prefetches with next link, limit your middleware from running everywhere. Look for an opportunity to leverage edge config or some low latency data store for data that's accessed to middleware to help out with your page speed. Go into your catch-all route and look for a reason to extend that that amount that it's running, or otherwise integrate on-demand revalidation. And then make sure you're using the built-in components next image and next font to help out with your layout shift, and that if you're using the latest XM Cloud Pages editor, that you're using metadata-based editing. So with that, I'll leave up links for the guide that we have as well as the template. But if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Alex. Honestly, I feel like there was so much information there. I feel like this is definitely going to be one of those things in the community that people will keep coming back to. So just a reminder to everyone listening, we've got around 200 people listening in right now, which is great. If you do want to ask us a question, feel free to drop them in the chat on community.vercel.com. I actually have a question for you, Alex,
Sure.
which comes up often. It is how can Sitecore digital asset management be integrated into the image optimization workflow?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We get this question sometimes from our customers. So in general, Sitecore DAM works well with Sitecore. And as far as Next.js is concerned, it's just pulling content from Sitecore. So whether that image exists in the DAM or otherwise or somewhere else in Sitecore, it doesn't really matter. As long as Sitecore JSS is accessing it from Sitecore and Next Link is configured again on that 20.1 or above, you're going to automatically collect the benefits of Vercel image optimization. So I'd say by default, you should be covered. I actually don't think there's any additional configuration you need to do other than making sure you're using the latest version of JSS, or sorry, not the latest version, later than 20.1.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. How well does Sitecore JSS integrate with the React Server components?
Yeah, great question. So I get this asked a lot. So right now, Sitecore JSS with Next.js is just compatible with Pages Router. So everything I was showing was kind of in Pages Router, which is why I was mentioning some of that nuance around NextLink. The Sitecore JSS team has prioritized getting the app router support done ASAP. I'm not going to say exactly when, because I think they're building the right foundation right now of a lighter SDK specifically for XM Cloud. But I know they've been prioritizing it and trying to get it done as soon as possible. So we've been working in lockstep with them to help support that when it's ready, it has the right support. But if there's any concerns or questions on it from the community, we'd love to hear them and help bring it over to the team there.
Amazing. So what should be considered when setting up multi-site configurations on Vercel with Sitecore?
Yeah, so we went through a little some of this, and I know I was kind of moving quickly. Generally speaking, I think my recommendation is, or shouldn't say my recommendation. Generally speaking, when I talk to a customer, I often see multi-site is there when it does.
Oh, I think, did we lose Alex?
I think we just lost Alex. I don't know what happened there.
That's fine. I guess we can continue. Oh, Alex is back.
Okay, welcome back.
Alex, can you just mute? Can you unmute?
Yeah, we've lost your audio there, Alex. You popped up for a little bit.
It's okay. Yeah, we still can't hear you. Okay, are you back? Oh no, he's going to. We may have to ask that question again. All good, Alex. I'm glad it wasn't just me because I thought it was my internet. His mic died. Let's give him a second.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if anyone does have any more questions for Alex, I think we'll take a couple more, maybe we'll ask maybe 3 or 4 questions, just because I'm conscious of time. So if you do have a question about Sitecore optimization, drop them in the chat. And if you can't see them, the chat, don't forget to join the community and click going on the event box. Are you back, Alex? AirPods is.
Always a good backup.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think we could ask that question again, Jacob, just because I think we missed that from Alex.
Hey folks, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All good. Yeah. Sorry, Alex. We actually.
But I can't hear you.
Oh no.
My microphone from my desk just died, so
All good.
apologies.
Can you hear us now? No. Okay. No, it's okay. I will try.
Live here.
Okay, hold on. I love how we're doing this like live right now. It's perfect. Let's debug. No, it's okay. I think conscious of time anyways, Alex, what we'll do is if anyone does have any more questions for Alex about Sitecore, definitely ask us in the community. I know Alex can't hear us right now, but honestly, huge thank you to him for being part of the community and this session. So Alex, I know you can't hear us, but thank you so much for being part of this. I will just remove him from this session and we can do a wrap up. Again, that was an amazing deep dive on Sitecore. Apologies for the technical issue just there, but I'm sure that this will always be super helpful content for our partners, customers, and wider community. I also wanted to share, just last week, we actually launched the partners community. If you're not already a part of this, check your emails. We sent out a newsletter with the invite link. If you have any questions on how to get that, let us know in the community.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I love doing these sessions here. We've actually got another one coming up next week on Wednesday, May 14th with Eric Vercel from the State of JS survey. He's going to be talking about running content-driven sites on Vercel, hosting courses, and using AI for prototyping and day-to-day operations. So so come check that out if that sounds interesting. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and hanging out in our chat, and we'll see you around.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.